Bonjour, welcome back. For the one who follow us since this morning, we just ended up a presentation right now with Sylvain, who explained to us the opportunities after the crisis, the COVID crisis. And now we're gonna and that's kind of directly linked to that previous presentation. We're gonna talk about the organic product and the marketing trends and distribution linked to that market. We are so lucky to have Sandra Shibasaki, with us. Sandra has spent over 10 years in the natural food industry, with experience covering marketing, the procurement and publications, brand management, and sales, with one of the largest natural food distributors in Western Canada. So if we are waiting for an expert to talk about that, obviously Sandra is the first name came in our mind. So I'm so happy to leave the floor to Sandra, and then for you, Sandra, to start the presentation.
Thank you, Frank, for that lovely introduction. You kind of stole my intro page, but we'll go from there. So I'm in Vancouver, BC, and it's just before lunchtime. Oh, I don't know what just happened here. Just before lunchtime, but this being the last presentation of the event, I thank you very much for sticking around. We're going to do a little overview on trends, marketing, and distribution of organic products, mainly in Canada. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to pop them into the comments box, and we can go through them after, or of course, unmute yourself and ask. I'm more than happy to have a conversation as well. So Frank went over this already, but just a little bit about me. I'm actually very new to Salud brand management, but I do have over 10 years of distributor experience within the marketing, publications, procurement, brand management side of things. And then now, as my new role is the director of brand development, I can add sales to that as well and have a nice rounded view of what happens within the CPG market. So that said, let's get into the first topic, which is trends. So no surprise, I'm starting with plant-based. Plant-based at this point can really be classified as a way of life rather than a trend. This is a way of eating that has become increasingly easier for consumers to get on board with. There's better tasting alternatives on the market now, not just in natural retailers, but in mainstream as well. And with the widespread reach of social media and the internet, it's not just about the inhumane treatment of animals anymore. It really is about the message that plants can aid in the overall health and wellness of your body, which leads to vegan no longer being widely used in plant-based marketing. Veganism and even vegetarianism has for a long time evoked thoughts of that family member or a dinner guest you had to make a special meal for. And it turns off the average consumer who maybe was thinking about trying something plant-based but didn't connect with the term vegan, so didn't make a purchase. Plant-based resonates a little better with a broader range of consumers who are curious and open to trying new things. And then another thing to consider is that the plant-based customer of today are the parents of our future generation who, by virtue of their parents' eating habits, might grow up with no desire whatsoever to eat anything containing meat. So what you eat or don't eat as a child to a certain degree will color what your thoughts are on food as an adult. So if meat is never an option at your dinner table from a young age, you might not be inclined to even try it as you get older. So burgers, sausages, chicken fingers, and meatballs, traditionally made with animal meat, but now made with plants in one form or another, has turned into a billion-dollar industry. So a few decades ago, you might have been hard-pressed to find vegetarian options on most restaurant menus, but now there are whole restaurants who are vegetarian, and at the very least, you'll be able to find a few options on any given menu. It no longer serves restaurants to alienate their vegetarian diners, as they are a large portion of their customers. But that obviously is only one arm of plant-based, and another category which contributes to the growth is the alternative dairy category. It started with soy milk, who was the pioneer in bringing alternative milks to the mainstream market. And while soy, hemp, and a few others have been kicking around for a while, it really opened the door to others like almond, cashew, pea, and rice. And of course, I'm sure we've all heard about the growing popularity of oat at the moment. So I don't know if there's anything else that someone can try in milk, but for now, oat is enjoying the spotlight. So those are the two big categories, but of course, plant-based reaches across all categories. The dairy category is probably the largest hit when it comes to new plant-based formats. Rather than dairy ice cream, we have coconut ice cream or nice cream, which is based on bananas. And there's now tons of cheeses and yogurts that are dairy-free. Or sorry, not dairy-free, but they're dairy-free. They're plant-based. So if it's currently on the market, it's almost certainty that someone will try to make a plant-based version. So another trend that has been floating around for a while but gained further interest recently is the overall desire for functional foods. So with COVID being front and center for the last year and a half and hearing daily stories about death and severe illness, the ability of your body to fight this disease has become increasingly front of mind. Consumers want to eat well because, of course, food gives us comfort, but they also want that food to provide their body with the tools it needs to potentially fight off illness. And along with the conventional definition of functional foods, meaning things like fruits and vegetables, ingredients are gaining credentials as something desirable to look for in your packaged food products. Probiotics enjoyed popularity with the explosion of the kombucha craze and has become commonplace on the front of product packages along with prebiotics. And ingredients known to have anti-inflammatory or other wellness attributes have become desired aspects of products across any and all categories. And outside of the pandemic, the other aspect that is likely driving this trend is our increased senior population. Our baby boomers have reached the age where health and wellness is top of mind, and they're on the lookout for ways to keep themselves active and enjoying life. So keywords like immunity, probiotics, fermented, and superfoods are meant to trigger consumers to thoughts of health and giving their body an extra benefit by consuming these types of products. So with worldwide travel frowned upon, consumers have needed to soothe their cravings for out-of-the-norm flavors from their own kitchen. So here in Vancouver, we're fortunate to have pretty much every food style you can think of. But with more time spent at home cooking rather than eating out, consumers are experimenting more on their own, either by trying out new recipes or purchasing ready-made frozen format foods from the grocery store to try at home. So Saffron Road is an example. It has frozen meals based on Indian cuisine. Mitoku is an imported Japanese brand who offers flavors like umeboshi paste or pickled ginger like you find in sushi. And P.F. Chang's is a restaurant chain found in the US who came out with frozen Thai meals. And with COVID in 2020, we didn't see a lot of product launches as most brands had to focus on their day-to-day operations or just keeping their employees safe, obviously. But with things easing back into normal, I would anticipate that we will see more innovations hit the shelves and new trends emerge. So moving on to marketing, and this is a big topic and actually my favorite. It can cover a huge area, so it was hard for me to narrow this down. But taking into consideration the audience and that you may be considering bringing your product to Canada, I thought I would talk a little bit about branding. So in my mind, branding really is the heart of your product. It's what a consumer will remember and has the capacity to speak volumes visually. It's the trigger that causes a consumer to pause at the shelf and consider your product over somebody else's. And what speaks to one consumer may not resonate to another. And in the Canadian market, up until a few years ago, there was a difference in branding when comparing organic product or natural to those known as mainstream. So Happy Planet that you see here is a local brand to Vancouver, and I feel like they've done well to bridge that gap between the natural and mainstream markets. We'll just show you a little bit about why. So Happy Planet actually has various categories of product, but you'll find that their branding is very consistent throughout. And the actual name Happy Planet in the bubbly, seemingly handwritten font, maybe done by a child, evokes a light and fun feeling and is clearly defined as the brand. And the flavor profile is clear and in colors that reference the flavor. The visuals show exactly the ingredients of the flavor profile and make an attractive, fresh pop of color that defines the SKU. So all of this combined makes for an excellent presence on the shelf. When you see these lined up, it's clean, easy to distinguish SKUs, and creates a solid block for brand recognition. And I didn't want to single out any brand for bad packaging, but over the years, I can tell you that I've seen a few brands submit product where you couldn't distinguish what the brand name was. You had to hunt for it. The flavor profiles weren't adequately identified, and you had to hunt to figure out which SKU you were looking at. They all looked the same. And just to show a comparison of mainstream brands versus organic, Allen's is another Canadian brand found in chains like Walmart. The branding isn't necessarily bad, but I feel like it looks a little outdated and not as creative or fresh as Happy Planet. And previously, there had been a very defined divide between products found in mainstream versus natural and organic retailers. However, in the last decade, there has been a shift. Many retailers have realized that organic products are in demand, and that is where the growth is. And you can now find organic brands in amongst mainstream or in dedicated natural organic aisles within the grocery stores. And with the shift, organic brands are adjusting their branding to suit the mainstream market, and the mainstream brands are adjusting to compete. And one other thing I will touch on is the difference between aesthetics in countries. I've seen product from other countries, and the graphics or the font are so different than anything that we've seen here. And I'm not saying it's bad, but I think you do have to consider your audience when marketing a brand. And so I would caution in assuming that what works in one country will work in Canada. So social media dominates our existence, and I'm sure it's no different elsewhere. If you think back to pre-social media, the only advertising we saw were those brands belonging to large corporations who could afford to create commercials and air them on TV. Nowadays, not only is cable TV and commercials almost a thing of the past, social media has made it possible for startups to create really excellent video and photos with very minimal budget and upload them for free on platforms like Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, among others, and reach thousands of people. It's also made it possible for brands to market to consumers all over the world. And with social media, you could advertise your product and generate interest before it even hits the market in that given country. So social media offers the opportunity to get a little personal. You're not doing a one and done TV commercial, you're communicating with customers on a regular basis. So telling a story is important. A good product will get you sales, but a good story will get you brand loyalty. So this is where it's beneficial for those smaller brands who tell a story of people just like you or I who had a need or a problem, created a solution, and now want to share it with others. It's relatable, so the appropriate spokesperson can draw people in with their personality. And the weekly or daily exposure of your brand on social media offers you a chance to interact directly with a consumer. You answer their questions, address concerns immediately, and with a feeling of one-on-one that consumers didn't have before with their brands. And of course, it's talked about a lot, and sadly true, that our attention span isn't what it used to be. So if you're still paying attention to this presentation, I thank you. We click, swipe, tap away in interactions that take seconds. So you need to make your messaging very succinct and memorable. So a topic not as fun as branding or social media, but worth talking about is getting on the shelf. You've heard me mention a few times about natural and mainstream, and there are some differences to consider when you're bringing your product to the shelf, and this will also lead into the next section about distribution. So at some point, you'll choose whether your product will be best received in the natural channel or the mainstream, or maybe both, but this is just a snapshot of what you can expect when it comes to marketing spend. So I'm guessing this is the same everywhere, but when we refer to retail customers here, we call them key accounts, A accounts, B accounts, depending on the volume that they might do with any given retailer. In the natural channel, to get your product on the shelf, you'll likely be asked to give a free fill, which is one case, not a unit of product. And this essentially secures your place on the shelf for consumers to be able to find your product. This is called the listing fee. And with mainstream retailers, who are usually chain stores with hundreds of locations across the country, it's usually a slotting fee. And these can run anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000 per SKU, and sometimes a free fill will also be required. And the promise being that your product will be planogrammed into every location. And this is why we see mostly corporate brands on the mainstream shelves, because generally speaking, a local regional brand can't afford those kind of slotting fees. So for both channels, once you do get on the shelf, you'll need to provide further discount periods throughout the year on your product, and this is called your annual planning. The store will want to see how much support and ad dollars you'll be able to provide, and there's obviously a lot of detail and calculations that go into annual planning that I'm not going to get into, but obviously doing the math is very important. So I've left the most boring part for the end, unfortunately, but it will be short. So you will need the services of a distributor, especially as an imported product. And for the most part, food distributors work within specific channels. So we have distributors who service the natural foods market, mainstream chain stores, produce bakery, etc. So finding a distributor who will be the right fit for your product should be considered. And it might be taken out of your hands, because once you submit a product, it'll be up to the distributor to decide whether or not your product fits their clientele. But I do recommend doing your homework on your potential business partner. And then another thing to keep in mind is that while a distributor does have a sales team, that sales team is working with thousands of different SKUs, and they're not dedicated to any one brand, regardless of what a distributor might tell you. So the distributor sales team is there to service the retailer, not one brand specifically. So securing distribution isn't the end of your work. So it'll be up to you to ensure your brand is moving off the shelf by having either a local sales team or hiring a broker to help your product when it comes to retail. And like distributors, brokers also work in specific channels. So finding the appropriate broker within the contacts that you need will be key. So each of these topics really is a bigger discussion, but hopefully you got a few pieces of useful info. I've left my contact details up on the screen there, so feel free to connect. I'm always happy to have these kind of discussions. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Thanks very much. That was great. Even the last part was not boring, don't worry. Not at all. We do have some questions. The first one would be my question. Sorry, I hope that would be a fast answer. But I noticed in one of your slides, you pick up this product that was made, and you mentioned that about P.F. Chang, which is this chain restaurant in States. And I found it very interesting because it looks like we all know that during the pandemic, where especially the restaurants were closed, what customers couldn't go to the restaurants. And when I saw that, I realized that it could be maybe a trend for restaurant that, well, you cannot come to our restaurants, we go to your plate ourselves. And do you see that happening as a trend as well? Like maybe, of course, we're talking about big names and people who have, restaurants who have operators who have credibility and visibility in their market, in national market. But do you see that that could be a trend as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think we're seeing it already. There's already a I don't know what you'd classify them as, an eatery or a cafe, Freshie, locally, yes, that we've had here for quite some time. They've come out with a very full range of pre-made meals and juices that are coming to retail. So I think it's definitely something that restaurants will start thinking a little bit more about, because, you know, God forbid we do get through and then we have another pandemic come across, these restaurants really suffered, right? So they need something to be able to supplement if that happens again. So I think that will be something that we'll see.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I got a question from someone that's about the. Okay, so organic organic support mainly local businesses, but trends are also global, especially about flavors or influence of ethnic food or what. How do you do we reconcile both aspects of again organic more local versus fusion food or influences from ethnic food from other countries?
Sorry, can you recap that question
Sure.
again? Organic global food?
No, well, myself as a customer, if I'm very organic oriented, and I just want to make sure that I pick up what my selection or choice of food is mainly driven by the organic aspect of it. Basically, I support local businesses, but I know as well as a customer to challenge myself, or I like to try new things, and usually those things are coming from global, from overseas. We've seen lately the Pokeball, for instance, just the first things come in my mind. So the difference from Hawaii cuisine, food. How do we reconcile both aspects? Is that something that you see as a challenge for the customer, whether one or the other, or maybe both, or what?
I mean, it's a personal choice, right? What has the higher priority to you, whether it is eating organic, and that just means straight eating organic. It doesn't matter where it's from, as long as it's organic, you're fine with it. Or if eating local is a priority for you. So I think it would have to be a personal decision.
Yeah. I've got another question about kids and again trends, and we know we experience trends as ourselves consumers, but what about our kids and in that, do you know, that's a question because I'm a father, but 2 old kids now, so they are not at school, but do you know any programs or what that are available at school to get kids more exposed, more aware of the organic food, for instance?
Yeah, I think, like I said, with the parents at home, our young parents now that have kids, they're the ones that are very much driving this organic, local train that we're all on. But also within that, schools now have, organic gardening programs where they either take the kids out of school to these garden plots, or they have these garden plots in school, and they teach them about sustainability and, the air and the earth and all that. I don't have kids, so I'm not speaking from experience, but from what I understand from reading and watching the news, this is something that is very much talked about in classes nowadays. So I think, and it's only going to expand even more as we go along, I think, because those kids that are learning these things now, they're growing up and they'll teach others, and they'll want that kind of curriculum, and they'll push for that. So I think you'll see them becoming very much more involved in driving these kind of, not trends, but the ways that we should live.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure we have any more questions right now. I don't know. Maybe if ever we have any more questions, obviously we'll be happy to send them to you, and then we can always reply by email or what. I want to thank you again very much, Sandra, for your time and a grateful presentation. The presentation will be available for the one who want to replay it, and you just for that, now, because I keep saying the same thing at the end of every conferences, but you go on the a platform, and then you click on the presentation that you miss, and Sandra's presentation will be available, or is already available in a few minutes. I want to thank you very much for your time and the great presentation again, Sandra. That was great. Thanks very much. I want to thank all the people who attended today that conference. It was a great time altogether. I hope that everybody learns new things. For me, I did, of course, even though I'm partly into that business as well. Thank you very much to all. Good evening for the one in France. It's almost 9:00 at night. For the people on the east side of Canada, you past lunch. As for us, Sandra and ourselves, we're gonna have to go for lunch now in Vancouver. Thank you again for your time, and see you next edition of Best of France 2022. Thank you.
Thank you.